was going to be a weird 15-minute or so live stream walk and talk today. I was having weird thoughts this morning. Weird thoughts. So, what kind of weird thoughts were you having, Dee Dee? I'm glad you asked. I've seen people do that. I always wanted to try that. So, I decided to lay in bed and think of myself as far back as I could remember and see how many memories I had of myself. So we're talking about from the time I was possibly conceived or a baby on upward into who I am now. So the longest time I can remember, farthest time back, I believe I remember being in my mother's womb. Yes, I know that sounds crazy, but I do kind of remember or have reminiscent thoughts of that. I remember it looking kind of reddish, not like your normal red, like a color red, but more like an orangish red, and dark, and very liquidy because, of course, I was in water, amniotic fluid. And I remember feeling like I was floating, like listless, kind of like gravity was not holding me down yet. Now, whether that's a real memory or not, I don't know, but that's just kind of where my mind goes when I think about that. And then the next thing I remember, and my mom has verified this one, I remember being a baby in a plastic, what they call a nip-nap seat. I don't know what they call them now. But it's hard to describe. It was very thin plastic because back then they didn't have technology they have now to make things sturdy and safe. It was just literally this white seat. I remember it was very thin plastic, like thin like this. And it had slats in the back, like holes, kind of. And then you would put this piece of foam rubber. I remember, I'm getting mad because this stupid thing keeps reconnecting. I remember my mom putting that in there for my brother and whoever else. And then you take this little white plastic strap and you put it across the baby's belly and strap them in. What is that? Huh. Look what I just found. It's an eagle on a piece of wire, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Somebody must have lost it, but it's in the middle of the street, so finders keepers, losers weepers. That's what we always said. Anyway, so she would put me in that little nip-nap seat, and my cousin Debbie would come on over and start tickling my toes. Now, that was at my Aunt Ginger's house, and I was sitting in the middle of the kitchen table. Do you guys remember those tables? They were like long and flat, but they were like oval shaped, and then they'd have metal down the sides of them. That's what the table looked like, if I can remember correctly. I think that's the kind of table she had. We had one out at the cottage, but I think that's the kind she had too. And I was in that nip-nap seat sitting up on her table. I was facing my aunt's living room, and my cousin Debbie came along and she was tickling my toes. And I remember telling my mom that, and she's like, how do you remember that? You could have been like maybe 4 months old, 6 months old at the most. I don't know. I just remember. Yeah. And I think my cousin Bobby was also standing there, but I'm not sure. I just remember my cousin Debbie doing that. I also remember when my parents divorced, I was like 2 or 3 years old. And my dad would take us, my brother and I, and he'd put us in laundry baskets. Like just lay us in the laundry basket. And I think he threw like clean clothes on top of us. So we couldn't really see. And he would pick up the laundry basket and he would carry it to some other place in the house and then set it down And then when we got set down, we would take all the clothes off of us and jump out. And we were like disoriented. We didn't know where we were. It was like a fun little game we played. And he'd move me to the basement, or he'd move me. We couldn't look. We couldn't peek. That was the rule of the game. And he'd put me, I don't know, in a bedroom or wherever. So I remember that too. And I saw my dad like that. Like he had visitation rights when I was like between the year 2 or 3 years old till maybe 5 years old, maybe 6. But I was little. I was tiny. It is not chilly at all this morning. It's beautiful out. And that was great fun for us. We loved that. I can remember being like maybe 4 years old up in my cousin Lisa's bedroom of my grandma's house and laying in bed and Grandpa telling us scary stories, and I'd have nightmares. I definitely remember that. I can remember laying in my bed and not wanting to go past my closet door in my old home because I was afraid there were cowboys in the closet. Apparently, cowboys in the closet was a scary thing to me at 4 years old. And sandwiches flying around the room. Yes, for real. That's what I was afraid of as a child. I also remember, now we're getting older because, well, I can tell you more of my younger stories too. I remember being out at the cottage. Good morning, Craig. And there was this big yellow fence. It was like a big square, but it had an X in it. And we'd walk through that fence, my cousins and I. And I remember walking down to the beach in my flip-flops and getting sand in my flip-flops. I definitely remember that because I remember how icky it felt. And I remember my mom taking a towel after we got back from swimming at the lake and just brushing us all off, getting the sand off of us, because we could not go back into the cottage with all that sand on us because Grandma would not be happy. So I remember that. I also remember baths in this big, huge tub, but not a bathtub. It was a big metal, I don't know what you would call it, like a big pot, kind of. I think there's a name for it, some kind of pot. And my mom would fill it with water when we were little enough to fit in it and give us baths in it. And I remember sitting in that thing and taking a bath. And I was little, guys. Little. It's funny, I have those kind of memories, but short-term memory, forget it. And memories of like raising my kids and stuff, very fleeting. Not many of them, unfortunately. It's almost like my brain has erased all of my babies from my brain, and it's like sad to me. I don't like it. I really have to think hard to try to remember a lot of those. Well, I had a lot of trauma back then too. I didn't have a lot of support from my first husband, so there was a lot of sad things and painful things that happened. So I'm sure my mind blocks it out as a protective mechanism, most likely. Anyway, I'm hearing firecrackers going off this early in the morning. What on earth? Or trucks backfiring, but that sounded like a firecracker or a bunch of them. Anyway, so that was probably about till I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. Possibly 5, but I didn't fit in that kettle for baths at 5 years old at all. So it wasn't that long. I also remember after my mom got remarried to my stepdad, we would go back to the cottage. And I remember sitting on the, what was called a lounge chair, or chaise lounge, I think they called it. But this one had big cushions, and they don't make these anymore. Again, this was an old version of the modern day lounge chair. It was thick. It had thick straps on it and these big, huge, thick cushions on it that you laid down. And again, covered in vinyl. We covered everything in vinyl back in those days. By the way, I was born in 66, if that tells you anything. So this would have been in the 60s to 70s realm, era, whatever, that I'm talking about. So I remember laying on that, and there was this little kitty that would come up and sit on my lap, and I would pet him and just love on him, And then he would walk away. He was just a field cat. Speaking of cats, I stepped on a mouse this morning. It was gross. It was a tiny little mouse, but that's not nice to have under your bare foot when you go to use the restroom in the morning. I live near fields. That's why we get a lot of field mice, and cats kill mice, unfortunately. It's not something I like, but it is part of life, unfortunately. Even with the doors shut, there are mice that get in, probably from when we had the flooding, and we haven't sealed up the walls completely yet. We need to do that. So that was kind of icky. Anyway, I tossed the mouse out into the field. I was going to put it in my garden, but I was afraid the cats would mess with it and keep digging at it, and I wanted the poor mouse to rest in peace as much as possible. Anyway, so after all that, the cottage stuff, I remember we went back to the cottage with my stepdad, and it was after we had a blizzard, and the ice, y'all, was so thick. I'm going to go over the apple tree street. The ice was so thick we could walk up on top of the snow, like we were lifted up off of the ground, because it was just like a thick coating of ice on top of the snow. And we'd walk all around the yard just because it was so fun that, like being up on stilts or something. It's pretty wild. And then when it melted, of course, it was probably all floody. I don't know. I wasn't out there during that time. Just when the snow was there. Oh, excuse me. I'm still trying to wake up. It's early for me. Not early to get up, but just early. It just feels early. We would have cookouts out at the cottage. I remember that. I remember playing badminton. That was like something I played for years. But I remember being the little girl trying to get the birdie to meet the racket to hit it over the net, and I couldn't do it. I remember swinging that thing over and over, and the birdie not landing on the racket to get it over the net. And then I remember as the years went on, it got easier and easier to do that. And then one day, it just happened for me. In fact, I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to buy a badminton set. I think that'd be cool to play with Matthew this summer on the cooler days when we like to go out and play frisbee and stuff like that. I want to get a flying disc, and I want to get a badminton set. Maybe next check. Who knows? Anyway, so that would be cool to have one of those again. We did play frisbee out at the cottage, but more often the badminton. I remember another thing. Pickleball. I'm good. I don't need to try pickleball. I've done it before. It's not really my thing. What was I going to say? Trackball. I remember seeing on TV the trackball commercial and getting so excited, thinking it was some kind of a magical ball. The way the styrofoam ball would go, it would like zoom around like this in circles. And sorry, Wendy, that your surfboard went missing. You put it in the black paddle, and then instead of throwing it like underhanded, like those scoops that have balls in them, it had a big crisscross pattern on it with a track, and the ball would literally roll up the track and out of the paddle. So you'd go like this way to do the track ball, and when you did that motion, the ball would zoom up the track and whip out of the paddle and go over to the other person. And it was really fun. I got excited when I got my first trackball kit. Oh, and I remember this too. In my backyard when I was younger, I don't know how old, probably 10, 12 years old, we had a dart set. Do you guys know what darts are? Those lawn darts. They're like big darts, and you throw them underhanded into a hoop on the grass. And my brother threw it, and he said, "Don't go over there," or something like that. And I didn't listen, and I ran over there thinking I was going to get the dart, and I got the dart all right in my ankle. Yeah, I ended up having to go get 2 stitches in my ankle. It's the first and last time I ever got stitches. It was not a pleasant experience, let me tell you. It is not fun to have stitches in your ankle. You have to get a big long needle. They give you a shot right in the hole where the dart went in. And then once it's numb, they stitch you up. Whew. So yeah, I had that happen. So those are all kind of things from my childhood. I also remember going to Toronto, and there was this place called the Castle Loma. This huge old castle. And there were windows in this place. But the windows, the way they were, yes, Craig, that's exactly what it is. The windows were round, but they stuck out of the building. So they were like, picture this building that's flat, and you had windows that literally stuck out. So you're laying against this pane of glass. You're looking down, and you're literally seeing everything down there. And yeah, my stepdad liked to take pictures like that. And he made me sit in the window, and I remember just being scared out of my mind. And there's a picture of me sitting in the window that my mom has. I'm hoping someday I get copies of the pictures my mom has of us as kids. I would love to relive those memories of my childhood. Hi, Meech. Yeah, did you come and say hi? So everybody can see you again? Here she is. There's the Meechie. All right, do you want to walk ahead, or are you staying back there? Go on. Go ahead. Come on. Oh, there's my Bobo. Hi, Bo. Hi, Bowie man. Lead the way, buddy. Lead the way. All right, anyway. So, it's just some memories I was laying there thinking about this morning. There's other ones, but there's so many I wouldn't have time to do them all. But that just kind of gave me something to talk about while I did my almost 17, 18-minute walk here. And now I'm home. So I will go in the house, make my lunch, finish getting ready for work, and away I go. Thanks for hanging with me again, Craig and Wendy, and anybody else that watches this later or is watching it now. I hope you guys have a great day. I am off to the workplace shortly, and I bid you a fond adieu. Pray that you have a great one today. Be blessed, everybody. Shalom.